somebody.
Barack Obama has been part of your congregation here in Chicago. How much has that influenced him?
Yeah, I think that's a part of who he is. I think being a part of the African American church, I want to say almost by osmosis, he's picked up some of it, and it's grown in him and grown with him, and he has grown with it. You know, I would love to say that sitting around listening to some of us speak, that he picked up some of our finer points, but I think he's made them his own.
His speaking is absolutely suffused and characterized by the traditions of black utterance, the musicality of it. You know, they said this day would never come. They said our sights were set too high. Da, 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 da. There's that musicality. There's also the rhythm of it. His speeches have a rhythm, a sort of rise and a fall, which plays with your emotions. And that's absolutely about black preachers.
We will be equal with the angels. Angels don't marry because they do not die. Men and women marry because they die. And therefore they must multiply by procreation. You see, the human soul is so large that the world cannot fill it.
The thing I thought was interesting about Billy Graham, because I grew up in the Baptist church, so I was always watching him on television, you know. He never spoke more than 20 minutes, and he used very simple language. It was a kind of welcoming, simple, straightforward way of speaking, which made a big impression on me.
Sermons are in the bloodstream of American culture. Some people actually enjoy them. Just ask the president.
Hi, Charlie.
How was church?
It was fine. Stop it.
It sucked.
You're talking about church.
Oh, like I'm not already going to hell. What was the problem?
He feels the homily lacked panache.
It did lack panache.
It was a perfectly lovely homily on Ephesians 5:21. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her.
Yeah, she's skipping over the part that says, wives, be subject to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church.
I do skip over that part.
Why?
Because it's stupid.
One of the real reasons, I think, for the continued interest in oratory in American culture is the continued importance of Christianity in that national life. Not just the preparedness to sit down and listen to a sermon, but the enjoyment of the sermon.
Words. Words, when spoken out loud for the sake of performance, are music. They have rhythm and pitch and timbre and volume. These are the properties of music, and music has the ability to find us and move us and lift us up in ways that literal meaning can't. Do you see?
You are an oratorical snob.
Yes, I am, and God loves me for it.
I try to make it like a jazz music piece, where I've got a script, and there's this ad lib that comes in the moment, just feeling what's there. You know, a lot of communications has nothing to do with the words people say and the way they're processed in the human brain. A lot of it is just your body language or your tone of voice or the way you look in your eyes.
Communism gone, nuclear war receding.
People won't remember even 10% of the words that come out of your mouth exactly the way they come out. It's a miracle if people walk away from your speech with 4 or 5 points. So you have to think about that. I think you get better at it over time. It's like anything else, you know, the harder you work at something, the better you get at it. Now, I like a lot of the old Roman speeches. You know, I love reading Suetonius. In the 2nd century, wrote his History of the Caesars. So if you go back and read Suetonius, he's got big chunks of Cicero's speeches in the Senate. And my Lord, they said things about politicians then that are much rougher than we say today.
With 3 hours to go till the big speech, the crowds are staggering. No more than a few thousand ever heard Cicero speak. I literally just turned round and there were 1 million people behind me. Extraordinary. How on earth do you reach an audience of this many people? Well, first of all, you have to get them to shut up.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears!
The most famous oration in literature is in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar.
I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
evil that men do lives after them, the good is oft interred with their bones, so let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it was so, it was a grievous fault. And grievous
Mark Antony delivers a classic funeral oration.
Here and the leave of Brutus and the rest, for Brutus is an honorable man. So are they all honorable men.
But he's also persuading, playing the audience. The repeated praise for Brutus, his opponent, has the effect of undermining him.
But Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man.
Shakespeare, writing at the end of the 16th century, was alive to all the tricks of classical rhetoric.
The interesting thing about rhetoric is that it's part of the curriculum in the grammar school. And so everybody learnt the rules of rhetoric. I studied rhetoric as a Renaissance scholar and sort of listed endless rhetorical tricks in lists. Can't remember the names of any of them.
But Elizabeth I could.
I'm your queen, and like my father, I mean to rule. There is one thing higher.
She was proud of her Ciceronian Latin.
It's religion.
We just don't know whether she struggled as much as Kate Blanchett.
I ask you to pass this act of uniformity.
We know that she wrote poetry. We know that she read Latin and Greek.
My people.
If you think of Mark Antony's famous speech in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, where he sets up false propositions and knocks them down, she did the same thing in Parliament. Elizabeth understood public relations in terms of the media at her disposal. So if a lady at court wore a bigger dress than hers, she was sent home. If somebody wore more blazing diamonds than she did, had to take them off. And you can imagine what the diamonds looked like in the daylight. I mean, diamonds are the equivalent of having your own spotlight. And she also knows that she's up against other orators. And so when she speaks with tremendous emphasis.
I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman.
Now she comes to it, now she cogs the dice.
I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too.
In addressing the troops before battle, Elizabeth was following a tradition that goes back to the Greeks and has produced some of the most stirring oratory ever written.
Once more, unto the breach! Dear friends, once more, or close them all up with our English dead! In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger.
Are you going to do one of your Führer rallies, sir? What do you think I should say? I'm sure you'll think of something.
On the eve of the invasion of Iraq, Colonel Tim Collins made a speech which captured the imagination of the world.
My expectation, as it turned out correctly, was that within 24 hours of saying that they would be dealing with other dead humans. They may even be killing other humans, and some of them may be losing their own lives. And what one has to ensure, first of all, is that they are not overcome by the shock of this. Some of these young people had never even seen their granny dead.
If you are ferocious in battle, remember to be magnanimous in victory. Iraq is steeped in history. It is the site of the Garden of Eden, of the Great Flood. It is the birthplace of Abraham. You tread lightly there.
How did you prepare your speech?
Well, in a funny way, I genuinely didn't. I think that somehow, given the right circumstances, given the situation, given the solemnity of the occasion, the words just come to you. Most British generals who are considered to be good orators are really like somebody out of central casting. They'll sort of say, oh, do remember to bring out a clean hanky and use the loo before you cross the border. You never know, there'll be another chance, sort of thing. And for them, that's what good leadership sounds like. For us listening, we think, well, here we go again.
Every general, of course, has his own style. When he spoke to the Third Army on the eve of the Allied invasion of France, General Patton showed his lightness of touch.
I want you to remember that no bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor dumb bastard die for his country. Men, all this stuff you've heard about America not wanting to fight, wanting to stay out of the war, is a lot of horse dung. Americans traditionally love to fight. All real Americans love the sting of battle.
The hour of our greatest effort and action is approaching.
Cometh the hour, cometh the man. It could be argued that one of the reasons America even entered the Second World War was the tireless speech-making of Winston Churchill. If oratory thrives on adversity, there's been no more critical moment for this country than when his words went to war in 1940.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
My father really hated the idea of speaking without notes. He called it speaking on the unpinioned wing. And actually I've heard him do it, and he did it very well, made sometimes brilliant speeches, but he didn't like it.
I come here on a tide of hope.
He put a great deal of time into preparing his speeches, walking up and down the library at Chartwell, dictating always to his secretary. And I think he sort of, as dictating them, he heard them. Do you see what I mean?
Against the triumphant might of Hitler, with a greedy Italian at his tail.
He had a good manner of address. I mean, he didn't hold his notes up close and sort of, didn't feel that there they were, but he had them typed in a special way so that they looked rather like verse on a page, out of psalms. He called it psalm form, and his secretaries had to learn how to do it.
Ah, this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning.
Churchill always said that he got his oratorical skills from Tammany Hall. There was an old boy there, Irish-American, who was a gifted Irish immigrant-style speaker. And Churchill, on the first trip to America, would go down and listen to this man. And he'd never heard anything like it. It was raw. And he could do anything, He has great range. So every time you hear, we're knocking the over this and that and so forth, you're hearing an old Irishman that Churchill had listened to as a young man.
He had this phenomenal memory. I mean, he could remember poetry and indeed prose that he'd learnt when he was a schoolboy at Harrow. He had this phenomenal, it was like a most wonderful sort of larder of literature. And it was sacred, and it was profane, and it was patriotic. But it was thrilling when he was in a reciting vein. It was thrilling to be there, to hear it all roll out. And not by eastern windows only when daylight comes in the light. In front the sun Climb slow, how slowly. But westward look, the land is bright. I remember him doing that, and that absolutely gave me goose pimples down my back, and that was very moving and thrilling. That was when at a very difficult time in the war.
Not by eastern windows only, when daylight comes in the light.
Churchill's finest hour was as a war leader. It suited his style. He was less successful in Parliament, which has been home to a uniquely adversarial kind of political oratory for centuries, although some say it isn't what it used to be.
I noticed today in the papers and on the television they have now brought in a new person now to get people to vote Tories. I've noticed it now happens to be, and I saw on the website, Mr. Tosser. Now, I don't know which person this man was modelled on the front bench, but let me tell him, I always thought that party was full of them, and that's why they lost 3 elections.
No, it's not an afro. It's not tricolon. It's not even Praetoritio. It's John Prescott. Parliamentary debate, especially Prime Minister's questions, often seems to be more about point scoring and knockabout than serious argument. How much has it changed over the years?
Well, if we go back far enough, it was common to speak for hours with very few notes at all. William Pitt the Younger could deliver an entire budget lasting several hours, including dozens of separate measures, with actually very few notes in front of him, and having composed himself by walking around St. James's Park for maybe 20 minutes beforehand, and then enjoying a good dinner, and then going and delivering a detailed and wide-ranging budget lasting several hours.
Especially in the 19th century, it was very important that a politician be a great House of Commons figure. And there were real duels in the House of Commons where the effectiveness of an argument was crucial to the survival or fall of a government.
A very good parliamentary speaker could win not only the argument, but the vote by making a great speech. That's not usually the case today.